Well, this first one is on baby-led weaning from Rory. And he says, we follow Kresser's healthy baby code when introducing foods to our children, starting with purees and graduating to solid foods over time. She's recently learned of baby-led weaning. Completely unscientific aside, anything that starts with baby-led can't be a good idea, like baby-led bedtime or baby-led TV watching. Dude, baby-led bedtime is definitely not a good idea. Toddler-led bedtime and 7-year-old led bedtime is also not a good idea. The theory, as I understand it, is that you present your kid with chunks of various foods and let them choose what to eat based on their tastes, rather than forcing a puree of some kind that they may not prefer if they weren't being fed by you. Your thoughts? I know your kids are obviously paleo, and we're curious how you navigated the introduction of foods and respect for their preferences as their tastes develop.
We had no respect for them. We just forced food on them and told them, this is a hard life, kids. The sooner you learn that, the better. Or not really. So I did 2 blog posts on feeding kids paleo. So we should definitely link to those. They're old now, but I mean, everybody else's kids go through the same, they go through these cycles and,
I guess some of the baby-led stuff, Zoe loved liver. Like, we'd cook a piece of like beef liver or chicken liver and she would just hold it and suck on it. Bacon, apples. For me, and I don't know if this is just like a paranoid mom thing, but the choking thing was, and Zoe in particular, like, we did the finger sweep of her throat, probably.
Well, even when she was 3, maybe 4, we were traveling. We were in a Whole Foods doing like the food bar, and I had to get up and do the back strike.
She was our one that was prone to gagging and choking on food.
Because she has a tendency of only chewing her food like twice. Might be a genetic predilection there. And then she tries to swallow it whole.
She does take after me.
Readers of the Paleo Solution might
recognize
recall
a reference.
Yeah. So, I mean, we did that stuff, but we also... So this is one of the things... So for the little ones, when they're just transitioning, what was really interesting, and we had a fair amount of pushback around this, even from our good friend Eva T, but I think she was kind of misguided on that. We would puree a food and the kids were totally ho-hum about it. But if we just chewed it a little bit and then like took it and slapped it in their mouth, they ate it. Mm-hmm. Like it was...
Because they're fixated on what you're eating. And if you give them, it was mainly meat that we did that with.
Yeah. So that was interesting. And if you think about the whole gut microbiome thing and all that stuff, like it's kind of an intriguing story. Like when you look at the way that traditional cultures deal with a lot of the processes that we see as being unsanitary, and maybe this is why a lot of people die young due to infectious disease, but I think that there's some upsides too. So are we actually answering this question? I mean, we're kind of bouncing around.
Okay, so how did we navigate the introduction of foods and respect for their
Some of it was chewing.
Yeah,
food,
we offered them things, and like avocado, sweet potato. They both really liked sweet potato early on. Both the like orange yam ones, the purple kind of Hawaiian.
The purple sweet. And that was a funny thing too. Both of them loved all that stuff earlier, and I don't know if we burned them out or what, but now they don't really eat it that well.
And if they didn't like it, we would.
Put it back in rotation maybe 6 months later.
Yeah, we'd wait a little while and then offer it to them again.
What was that deal? Like neither one of our kids did the projectile vomiting of eggs, but like the egg yolk was the thing to introduce to the kids, but we actually punted that because everything that we read there seemed like 50% of the kids projectile vomited that, but we didn't have a problem with that. One problem we've had is fruit, even to this day, where particularly summertime rolls around. And
so we would get a rash from pineapple. She would just she loved pineapple. She'd eat a ton of it. This was just like 11 months old, 12 months old. And then she had a rash all over her legs. So we had to cut back the pineapple.
Well, and they will get the trots too. Like they'll eat fruit until they're shitting like geese. Yeah. So it's and it's tough because it gets hot and you want something simple and you don't want to arm wrestle with them over everything, and they like it. So it's like, oh man, you just keep on, chopping off logs of watermelon or apples. Like both, we've noticed apples are kind of rough on both
If they
kids.
eat too many apples, they'll both complain that their stomach hurts. So
Yeah. But again, I feel like we're kind of bouncing around this thing.
yeah, we didn't do the baby-led weaning. At least as I understand it, it's like you're putting whole pieces of stuff out there, and then they're tasting it and just going to what they gravitate towards. We sort of, whatever we cooked, we, gave them some version of that, whether it was sweet potato, pieces of cooked broccoli, fruit, meat, like you said, chewed it first. And there were things that they clearly spit out and didn't like, and we just waited and tried it again.
Yeah. It is interesting though when you look at the detox pathways in children. Like kids seem to have a more attuned sense for like bitter tastes, which it mainly comes from plants. So even to the degree that they ate greens, it was just like the very greeniest tip top of the broccoli.
Just the tip.
Yeah.
Like the leafy part.
The very end of the floret. Yeah. So like when you think about a nutrient density kind of story, like they smashed meat, they really went after liver. Sagan liked butter a lot, Zoe not so much, which was interesting. I mean, Sagan would ask for just a slice of butter to eat, but they definitely... It makes a ton of sense to me that the kids are gravitating towards these more nutrient-dense foods. We figured out with like salads, we don't do a ton of salads, we do some salad, but we figured out like 3 different dressings. You do a apple cider vinegar, olive oil,
1 clove of garlic, and a lot of salt.
And then puree that and put it on the salad.
That's now, and they're almost 5 and 7, so...
Right, but they wouldn't eat that stuff at all without that. But even to the degree they eat that, you put that dressing on ahead of time, and it almost kind of breaks stuff down because the acid load. So it's interesting. Like, I think that there's some pretty... I think people get overly concerned about getting greens into their kids. Like, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. They're not... If you get sufficient animal products in them, they're not going to be nutrient deficient. And
we made a lot of soups. We
did make a lot
of
of
soups,
soups,
especially in the winter. And so we would just puree that, and they would eat that.
And one side note, I remember reading about this stuff. Like, if you want your kids to eat things better, and it's kind of a pain in the ass, but if you cut things smaller, the kids will tend to eat more. And not surprisingly, this is also one of the things that we see
more hyperpalatable.
Makes it more hyperpalatable. So when people tend to overeat, it's when things are super cut up and well processed and everything. But again, I think that there's some interesting kind of evolutionary biology on just observing how kids eat. Like, they tend to gravitate towards nutrient dense foods. They seem to have a real aversion towards things that could potentially be toxic. Mainly like bitter type substances and stuff like that. What else? You definitely see the dangers of hyperpalatable foods real quickly with kids. So yeah. And man, that was all over the place for an otherwise like simple question. But I mean, there's a lot going on.
We had our first kid 7 years ago, and so the sleep deprivation that has ensued since then, like we basically forgot.
We should be having grandkids now instead of kids. So.
All right. Thanks, Rory.